Today's episode is presented by Early Bird. Early Bird is the simplest way for parents, families, and friends to collectively invest in a child's financial future, starting at the earliest age. Early Bird's mobile app empowers parents and families to start saving for their child's financial future in a matter of minutes, while activating a child's broader community to gift contributions on, birthdays, holidays, any occasion. Realistically, as a parent and somebody who has had to deal with having a family-funded child issue, it's never too early to start saving. And realistically, this is a great idea because you can, instead of saying, oh, well, here's $5 in cash in your birthday card, little Johnny, you can actually put the money away and invest it. And maybe when it's time for them to go to college or to go out and get out on their own if they're not going to go to college, or if you need bail money, I don't know how your kid's going to turn out. The point is, it's never too early to start developing financial literacy. I wish somebody would have taken me off to the side when I was a young parent and said, put away money now for your kid's future. You won't regret it. We're teaming up with Early Bird to give our listeners a free $15 investment to gift to a child you love. Simply go to partners.getearlybird.io/podcast, or to make it easier, click the link in the show notes, download the app, set up your account today. Early Bird. Build the nest and invest in the children you love. The podcast you are about to listen to contains at least one of the following: strong language, disturbing topics, abusive opinions, generally things that aren't appropriate for little kids or overly sensitive people. So, if any of that stuff's going to get your nose out of joint, this is your chance to turn it off. Welcome to I Had to Say It, the podcast where I talk about things that I feel need talking about, and sometimes they're not getting the attention they deserve. And your feelings, they're not under consideration. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of I Had to Say It. Today we're going to talk about something, it's a little late to the game, but it's something I had to deal with this week, so it's in my mind, and now it's going to be in everybody else's ears. The thing I was dealing with is, the other day I was taking my dog for a walk. It's nicer weather. It's actually been really friggin' hot here the last few days. But she still needs her exercise. I still need my exercise. So I get my old ass up and walk the dog. And a few blocks away from my house, there's a set of baseball diamonds. And like last year with the outbreak and everything, baseball was canceled. And I know we're midsummer now, so it's not like it's the start of spring training or anything like that. But it got me thinking, because as I was out walking the dog, I was at the tail end of some of the games that were going on there, and I kind of noticed they were conspicuous by their absence last year, but the parents in those stands around these ball diamonds, and these are not like even high school kids, these are little kids, it's Little League, it is children in their early years of life. So it's not even like there's going to be, scholarships on the line or anything based on their performance. But I've noticed this glut of asshole parents that are seriously way over competitive about something that is a bunch of little kids. And so it got me to thinking, and after some thought and mentioning it to my wife, and she pointed out to me, well, there's a whole lot of information out there about this, so why don't you do some research? And I'm, like I said, in the interest of trying to better myself, I've decided to start doing research for episodes, at least a little bit. I mean, you're still going to get mostly ranting and a lot of my mouth and my opinions, but I did decide to take a look at this and see if it was just me being overly dramatic or just how much these fucking assholes irritate me, especially when you're playing at that level. I mean, it seems to me like a lot of these parents, they think they're somehow helping by trying to coach from the sidelines and screaming and putting unrealistic pressure on these kids and being general pricks. And I've never once in the course of my entire life heard of a parent yelling from the sidelines that has in any way significantly affected any sporting event ever. The officials aren't going to change their calls because of you screaming from the sidelines like an asshole. The coach doesn't give a fuck about what your opinion is on how he should be handling his team. He doesn't think you know the players better and you know how to tell people what to do. And like it or not, your kid is not always going to be the fucking all-star. So with a little suggestion from the wife, I decided to do a little digging around, and she sent me some articles about, like, here, this is what I was talking about. And it's really not just me thinking that these parents are dickheads. It is like, legitimately, yes, they're dickheads. It's not just me being opinionated. And I did a little research, and I found some articles, and the wife sent me some articles, and I found one study in particular that just, it seemed to me like it was really valid because it was actually a survey. I'm trying to get used to citing sources here. It's by the nays.org, which is a National Alliance for Youth Sports, and it was done with current collegiate level athletes. It was a survey taken by one of the guys who he was concerned about his approach towards his own kids, and unlike most of these people who are just self-entitled jackasses, he found that he was going to talk to some of these collegiate age students about their parents and things like this, and the themes of overparenting in terms of kids' sports. And I mean, even when I was a kid myself, my parents were really cool about things. They told me, if you want to do something, do it. If you don't want to do something, you don't have to. They didn't force me to do anything. And it was never real high pressure as long as I tried. And if I was not happy with things, it wasn't like I could quit midway through the season. It was, well, you don't have to do it again next year, because that was part of the core of me being raised and not just, birthed and left to my own devices, as I was raised. And one of the things is that when you make a commitment, you stick to that commitment. You honor that commitment. So if I signed up to play a sport and I was going to be on the team, and I found out I didn't like the game or whatever, I didn't have to keep playing. I was not obligated to come back next year, but I was going to finish out that season because I said I was going to play, and the team made a spot for me. I'm committed. I'm going to play. But I never had my parents sitting on the sidelines. They were encouraging. They were, yay cheering when I was on the field or whatever, depending on the sport or, whatever was going on. But they weren't being these overbearing assholes or, trying to yell at the coach because they're fucking up and they're not. Everything would be solved if they just let their kid run everything and all this other shit. And hearing these ridiculously overbearing parents who, I don't understand the logic behind it. If you're, especially at that age bracket, when we're talking young kids, there's no scholarships on the line. There's no chance they're going to go semi-pro or play AAA ball or any of that other shit. Not at the level these kids are playing at. And you've got these, by and wide, it's fathers. It's not exclusively fathers. I've heard some mothers that can be royal pains in the ass as well. But under these circumstances, because it was boys' sports, it was fathers yelling at their kids and trying to coach from the sidelines. And first off, if you don't have the time to work with all the kids and to be a coach, then you don't need to be running your fucking mouth from the sidelines. The coach knows his players. The coach knows everybody's strengths and weaknesses. And you don't, so sit down and shut the fuck up. But I digress. The point is, like I said, these articles I was reading, there was a real common theme through all of them. And the one I cited was the one I'm actually going to be taking some information for this episode out of directly. The other stuff was like a lot of background information, a lot of stuff that I compiled more in my head than anything I could actually cite. But this survey basically showed that literally every kid this guy talked to in the course of this interview thought that over-involved parents were a concern, that they were an issue. It was not a beneficial thing to have over-involved parents. And he kind of divided it into different sections. There were the parents that were pushing their kids too hard, the parents that were taking all the fun out of the game for their kids by forcing them to run drills all the time, by having this one sport, whatever sport it could be, because he surveyed athletes of a whole bunch of different sports and both genders, male, female, a diverse ethnic background. This was a well-sampled survey. This was not just like talking to 4 kids from the polo team. So the general consensus was parents that were over-involved and overbearing in their involvement in these sports literally, not only did they make the kids not enjoy the sports as much, but in some cases literally pushed them into resenting and not wanting to partake in these sports anymore. And you're sucking that much joy out of your kid's life that they don't want to play the game like it's a game, because you're making your kid run hand drills, or you have to hit 500 balls before dinner because it's summer and you're off season and you're going to train harder. And you've got them on routines and scheduling, and you're trying to coach them, even though you're not actually a fucking coach. You're just some parent that's trying to live vicariously through their kids. And you're getting too emotionally involved over what should be fun times and being overly competitive. And I'm saying this as I am a competitive son of a bitch in pretty much everything I do. I want to win. I want to be the best. I want to be acknowledged that I'm the best. And realistically, the logical part of my brain knows I'm not the best. And I know I am a horribly overly competitive person. But on the other side of that coin, I try and maintain a little dignity. I try to lose with grace. More importantly, I try to win with grace. Because a lot of these really overbearing people, they get so emotionally involved that they don't know how to win or lose with grace. And when dealing with their children, the ones who are actually playing the sports, the ones who have actually won or lost the games, not only are they imparting their own shitty attitude towards sportsmanship, which is realistically the people that are taking these things that seriously, there's no sportsmanship on their plates. They are being obnoxious. You can hear them from blocks away screaming and yelling at the kids like they're getting paid or something. And ultimately, I can understand why these kids don't want to play anymore, because mom or dad or, Uncle Pete or whoever is pushing them that hard and sucking all the joy out of it. These kids, if they lost, they're already upset. They don't want to hear you flying off the handle and screaming about how they were robbed or any of that other shit. They just need time to process their shit and move on with it. You getting all bent out of shape and getting them worked up even further is the furthest thing from fucking helpful. So that was something that was stated by several of these student athletes. Their parents getting overworked over shit that was really not that significant really made them miserable about it. And then, kind of like I said, I mentioned it already, but living vicariously through your kids. If you are honestly convinced that your life turned out the way it did because you somehow got shorted and you didn't get the advantage of some sport you should have been amazing at, and you could have played ball, but you could have gone pro except for that time you hurt your knee, probably because you made some shitty fucking decision, and you probably fell off a water tower when you were drunk in high school because you thought you were the king of the world and untouchable, but realistically you were just another stupid fucking teenager who everybody was telling him how great he was because he played sports, but he didn't really play sports that fucking great, and didn't take life that seriously because everything was handed to you. And then you fucked up, you missed the bus, you had to get a 40-hour-a-week job, you had to grow up, you raised a family, you raised kids, and now you're trying to force your kids to live out your dreams. There's movies about it. There's TV shows about it. The kid doesn't want to live your life. It sound familiar? It should. So realistically, if you are one of these washed up never was fucks, I can't even call you a has-been, but a never was, you need to quit trying to force your kids to fulfill your failed dreams. You're going to fuck the kid up. The kid's going to resent you. It's going to be horrible. Nobody else in the stand is impressed that you can be the loudest, most obnoxious asshole on the bench. Nobody is going to look at your kid and go, right, you're right. That kid is a miracle worker that should be running the entire team and carrying the whole team on his back. You're right to put all that unnecessary pressure on a little child. You look like a fucking asshole. And it's just really ridiculous. And when it comes to dealing with these kids, how do you think that's going to work? I mean, if you as an adult would shit a brick if somebody tried to treat you that way, and you somehow have it twisted in your fucking head that kid's going to respond positively to you being a complete prick, you're probably embarrassing the kid. They're probably mortified because everybody knows that's your parent because they're making such a scene about that particular individual. So anyway, I guess the point of this whole little tear is, if you are a parent, and I assume most of the people listening to me are at the age where they're thinking about it, have thought about it, started spawning, whatever, maybe some older people that are my age where their kids are grown and out of the fucking house, and hopefully you weren't one of those jackasses on the side of the aisle screaming and yelling your damn fool head off, sucking all the joy out of something that was supposed to be a good time for the kid. Because regardless of how much you scream, regardless of how much you push, regardless of how much you drill and make these kids do things over and over again and make them... I understand to be good at something you need to practice it. You need repetition builds skill. It's not everyone is naturally gifted. Not everyone is born with the just inherent ability to be able to do shit like this. But At the same time, you need to be properly motivated to be successful in anything in life. But in this case, we're going to focus on sports and the overbearing, just over-involved, over-parenting in youth sports today. Because, like I said, that's what I saw, that's what got me thinking of it, and that's what we're going to talk about. So realistically, the question is, are you motivating the kid? Is the kid motivated because it's something he or she wants to do? Or is it something that their motivation is you telling them they have to? If there's no joy, if there's no satisfaction for them in the process, not only are they not going to wholeheartedly get involved in it, they're going to resent you for forcing it on them, and you're being a self-centered, shitty individual by you're supposed to be providing your kid with a life that they are going to live and become productive and useful out of. You are not supposed to be forcing them to be miserable at realistically, the only point in most people's lives where they are going to be happy and carefree is childhood. That's what childhood is for, to learn and grow and develop. Not to be a miserable fuck because you have to go out and do something that you don't enjoy because dad or mom or whoever said so. Because you're hanging all your shit on them. You're convinced your kid needs to be the next great whatever, and you're going to make them drill and train until they're perfect. And they're not going to have that motivation. They're not going to want to be successful. They're not going to want to do it. Because, realistically, you're not coming at it as it's not fun for them. There's no joy. And they're not going to be working up to whatever potential you think they should be working up to if they're not happy, and if they're not enjoying it, and if they don't want to do it. I mean, I'm all for seeing kids that have active parents in their life. Don't think I'm not. You should be involved in your kid's life. You should know what they like. You should know what makes them happy. And those are the things you should encourage, because those are the things they're going to be better at, and they're going to do better at. And if you stop and you think back about, what a miserable prick your parents were, and you somehow think that by going way too hard in the opposite direction, you're somehow improving the legacy, no, you're overcompensating for your shitty childhood, and you're pushing it off on your kids. I guess the takeaway I want people to have from this is that, to a certain extent, and I'm not one of those people that thinks kids should be making all their own fucking decisions. No, they shouldn't. Because at the end of the day, kids aren't necessarily going to make the decisions that are best for them, the decisions that have the best long-term impact, because children haven't learned to think yet. But when it comes to matters of things that are not core essential life decisions, when it comes to things they want to play, things they want to do for fun, they should be allowed to do the things that they enjoy. If they enjoy something, you should not go so goddamn gung-ho into the whole thing that you are going to suck the fun out of it for them. If your kid mentions that they like to play golf, you don't take them to the driving range and make them hit 300 balls every day so they can get a perfect swing so they can play in the PGA and get the Masters. No, get them a set of starter clubs. Take them to maybe get them some lessons so they learn how to do right, so they can learn how to have fun. Don't put a lot of unnecessary pressure on your kids. All you're going to do is fuck them up and ruin their lives and possibly send them spiraling into where they may wind up the subject of a true crime podcast someday, because next thing you know, they're out there murdering everybody with a shitty mustache and a cut-off tank top t-shirt because they remind them of, creepy Uncle Billy that was yelling at them from the stands at every Little League game. A little extreme, yeah, probably, but the point is not necessarily tempered. You have to think about these things. You're not going to make... You beyond a certain degree of natural talent, you can't force greatness. It's not... Do I think kids should be raised with no boundaries, no rules, no structure, no learning? No, I don't. That's fucking stupid. I have a few family members that have taken that very much. Oh, well, the kids make the decisions. Your kid is 5 fucking years old. They don't have the proper facilities to make all their life decisions. They can tell you they don't like something. They can tell you they want to do something. You should really encourage and support that, unless it's something that presents some sort of harm or danger to them. And maybe not forcing your own, hang-ups and bullshits and, well, I could have been great at this, so you're going to be great at this. That's a fucked up attitude for anyone to have. Am I saying these kids should be steering their own boat? No, they shouldn't, because they'd be having ice cream 3 meals a day. Their teeth would rot out of their heads. They'd be 500 fucking pounds by the time they were 12. That's not okay either. And I'm not going to say it is. But let your kid enjoy being a kid. Let them have their lives. Sit down and shut the fuck up. Be supportive. Be encouraging. Make your kid love what they're doing. And if they decide they can't do it, if they decide they don't have the right skill set, or if they're not getting any playtime because their coach realizes they're not going to help the team win, and that's a whole nother soapbox to get on. We need to go back to actually having winners and losers in sporting events, because otherwise you're teaching unrealistic life goals. There have to be winners and losers. I've talked about it before. Because if you don't have that mindset, you don't learn how to deal with loss early on in life. You're never going to be able to deal with it as an adult. And when you realize the real world doesn't give a nickel-plated shit about your feelings, it's already too late. So, yes, go back to having winning teams and losing teams. Learn how to win with dignity. Teach your kids how to win and be graceful about it. Teach your kids how to lose and take something away from it. Learn a little drive, a little wanting to do better because they want to win. That's the other part of this thing is I've noticed a lot of these kids, when you take away that one team wins, one team loses, and I haven't seen it as much as it used to be for a little while. It seems like some people have dialed back from the everybody gets a trophy mentality, and that's a good thing. We should not have everybody getting a trophy just for playing. But at the same time, you want them to have that drive. Without that, if you don't realize that it feels good to win, you're going to be willing to accept being on the losing side of things. So to the overbearing parents, you got to understand, being overbearing and trying to say, oh, my kid's going to be the greatest and they're going to do this and they're going to do that, if you're building it into this structure where there is no incentive to win and there's no real penalty for losing, you're beating your head against a fucking wall and you're traumatizing your kid for literally fucking nothing. And realistically, if it's Little League or youth sports of any form, I keep saying Little League because that's what I can hear from my front yard is the parents at the ball diamond screaming at their kids. But realistically, anything, if your kid is not able to drive themselves to the game, they don't need you putting extra pressure on them, and they don't need you acting like a twat in the fucking stands. Be encouraging, be supportive, cheer for your kids when they're up, when they're going, when they're taking their turn, they're taking their run at the ring. Encourage them, cheer for them, holler, be proud of them. Be proud of them for fucking trying. How about that? Instead of, penalizing your kid if they didn't win, you encourage them. You tell them, hey, you know what, buddy? You can keep practicing and you can get better and you can get them next time. You don't sit there and scream and yell about how it's bullshit and how they should be doing better and all this other shit. That doesn't encourage and foster that internal motivation, which is a necessary thing if you are going to be any kind of success at anything in the world. They used to say when I was a kid that when they were trying to encourage people to be involved in sports, being involved in sports and working on a team teaches you things to get you ready for life. And it did. It taught you how to work with other people. It taught you how to work as a team. It taught you how to deal with people you didn't like being fucking around to get to a goal that you were all working towards. I played sports when I was a kid. I played on teams with people I didn't fucking like. I played on teams with people where we got into altercations at practice or after practice or in the locker room because we had personality issues. But when it was time to go out on the field and work towards the thing, we didn't let that shit come in between us because we had a unified goal. We knew we were all working towards trying to win the damn game. And we kept our personal bullshit for outside of working hours. And that's part of preparing you for real life. The real world is not going to sit down and wait for you to get your shit sorted out. If you do that in survival situations, you're not going to survive. It's just the way life works. It's not necessarily the greatest thing in the world, but it's a fact. No amount of complaining about your feelings is going to change that. No amount of saying, well, this is the way it should be, is going to make that the way it is. And basically the core thread that went through every article I looked at, everything I read, trying to broaden my knowledge base about this, came down to the same basic tenets. The parents trying to override the coaches diminished this player's respect for authority. The kids who actually bought into my dad knows more than the person I'm supposed to be listening to were tougher to manage, were tougher to coach, were tougher to get to play their part of the team because they had this bullshit put into their heads by their parents that if they weren't running the show, shit wasn't going to work. And if they weren't grandstanding and trying to bring all the focus on their performance, then somehow the whole team was going to fail because they weren't carrying it. And the other side of that coin is not only did it fuck the team up, it fucks up the dynamic of the game and detracts from the coach's authority in there. But these kids subsequently started putting all this extra shit on themselves when they didn't win. They didn't see the fact that they were the ones causing all the disruption and stopping the rest of the team from performing and working together like they're supposed to as necessarily a consequence, but they saw it as their own failure because since they are the ones that had to bring everything together because their parents drilled this bullshit into their heads, then the loss is directly their fault. And again, it's making them miserable. And their parents getting overly emotional on the sidelines and getting into screaming arguments. And I've never seen it happen around here, but I remember when I was a kid, there were a couple times where parents would start screaming and cussing at each other across the field. And, in the bleachers from one side to the other, depending on the sport. And it never enhanced the experience. It never made it better for anybody. And that hasn't changed just because you've gone from being the kid on the court to being the asshole in the stands. So since you're driving this attitude and putting all this extra pressure on your kid and all this extra strain, stop and just ask yourself for a minute, why am I doing this? What is so damn important that I have to drill my kid until he's miserable or she's miserable or they're miserable or whatever the applicable case is? Why am I pushing so hard for this shit? If it is the middle of summer and my 13-year-old is playing a game, why am I getting so bent out of shape? Why do I treat this like this is going to somehow reflect on me as a parent if my kid is not the penultimate athlete out there, is not the superstar, is not the all-star? And realistically, honestly, if you're listening to me, you're probably not one of those people. People like that tend to avoid me like the plague. And if you've actually made it this far into the episode of me bitching about assholes yelling at their kids, I really appreciate you for sticking around and listening. And in case you didn't notice, I didn't do my usual sticking a promo in for another show like I normally would. And that's because the show I want you guys to go check out this week is not necessarily one that's going to give me a promo. I asked him. He said, you know what, if you actually listen to the show, you actually like the show, you actually want to endorse my show, just talk about it. I'd prefer that. So the show is called 8750. That's 8750. You can find it punching those numbers onto any podcatcher out there, and it's there's basically two hosts that are there on the regular. There's always Jeff, and then there's usually Reed, and then they have an assortment of third people that kind of rotates through. There's a lot of guests, a lot of different people on the show. And it's just sort of a general, it's funny as hell. I laughed my ass off. I found it by accident. It was listed in Twitter and somebody else's post like, hey, check out this podcast. And I went and checked it out, and I wound up binging the whole, I'm all caught up, let's put it that way. So this is my personal stated endorsement for the 8750 podcast. It's entertaining. It's funny. They talk about just all sorts of random shit, and it's good for a laugh. And there's a lot of big personalities on the show, and just go check it out. All right. So anyway, that's gonna be my ad spot for another show in this episode, and that's also gonna be how I'm gonna wrap this one up. So, just like I always say, be decent, be good to each other, be better people. And for now, that's what I had to say. Thanks for listening to another episode of I Had to Say It. If you get a chance, check us out on social media. There's a Facebook group, there's Twitter, there's Instagram. I Had to Say It podcast is pretty much the trigger for all that stuff. Or you can check us out online at www.ihadtosayitpodcast.com. There's links to all the social media and to all the platforms that we are streaming on. And there is contact information for any of the restaurants or local businesses or musicians that we've talked to or will be talking to, or anybody I have mentioned in any of the previous episodes. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.